Hello everyone, Chris Sawyer here. The Varietal Show is back. Welcome to my cellar. I know everyone's like, oh wow, who's the special guest star today, Chris? And as a sommelier to the stars, you are. That's right. We're going to do a little class today on something that I've been meaning to talk about for quite a long time, and that is what is a great vintage? Now, I could bring a lot of guests on, but I would have too many guests, and I thought I'd tell it to you from a very special perspective. I was inspired to do this class over the past couple weeks for a few reasons. First of all, I did a great class with Pinot Noir just at the San Francisco Wine School, and this very one right there, Papapietro Perry, and their fabulous Pommard Pinot Noir. We're going to talk about Pinot Noir is going to be one of the main focal points. And then I was also featured in a movie, and you may have seen that amazing interview that I did with Troy Christian. And the movie is A Perfect Vintage. And if you haven't seen it, please watch for it or look for it out there. It is screening right now. You can get it all over the place. Just look up A Perfect Vintage and you can find those sources. It's actually available across the nation right now, and it came out in March, and I'm honored to be a part of it. But you know, that movie was about the 2013 vintage in Napa Valley. And to be really honest, it's an amazing vintage. And you'll really see that in that movie. And you'll not just see it from my perspective, but you'll see it through Timothy Milos and Angelina Mondavi and all these other great people that are in there from a winemaking standpoint and what makes a perfect vintage for them. So we're going to start there at what makes a perfect vintage for the winemakers. And then we're going to kind of go down the line about what the heck do we do with the perfect vintage and how do we know if it's a perfect vintage and who benefits from it and who does not, or who is going to get it in different ways. Okay, so the one opportunity I want to say, so we're going to use Napa and Sonoma as great examples here. Two grapes that are very, very special, and they are the red grapes of those two areas. We have Napa Valley, obviously, and the warmer areas of Sonoma County that are very well known for what variety? Cabernet Sauvignon, that's right. And we're going to use the cooler areas of Sonoma County, coastal areas, as well as a little bit of Carneros to illustrate Pinot Noir. So what I want to say is that we have done so well in these two areas that every vintage, if the fruit set is right there at the very beginning when harvest starts, as the beginning of harvest, we look at each vintage as being completely perfect until proven otherwise. And that usually has to do with Mother Nature. So when you get going into we get into summertime, fruit sets going further, and now the veraison starts. That's when the grapes start turning purple to red, or red to purple, sorry. You start really looking at where are we at as far as yields and potential and all of these kinds of things. If we can make it that far, that's pretty good. So we're going to talk about, how this really went about in the last decade. And that was a hard time because if you recall, it was kind of a crazy time for grapes. In the first 2010 vintage was a heat spike that was from hell. 2011 definitely affected more Cabernets than Pinot Noirs because it rained really bad in the kind of last part of September and October. And then we got into 12, which was, oh my gosh, we're back. And we got a lot of stuff to talk about here, except the yields were huge. So what is the balance there that we can find? 2013 for Napa Valley and the Cabernet producers in Sonoma County was an outstanding vintage. And that's really what the movie A Perfect Vintage was about. I used an example here, and this is the O'Shaughnessy Howell Mountain that I pulled from the cellar here. This is the 2013 vintage, as I said, and it's Cabernet Sauvignon. One of the things about when we screened the movie at in Napa Valley at the Cameo in St. Helena a few weeks ago, we tasted some of those 2013 vintage wines. You know what? They were amazing, but some of them were still so young. Why were they young? Why was it a great vintage? Well, Mother Nature, when she doesn't give you so many challenges, she gives you the opportunities to really ripen the fruit as far as you can and to see what the potential is and to hopefully set a new bar for where we can achieve and what we can achieve past. Or we and I shouldn't say and we should be able to get a flavor of the vintage in that wine too. So what I got out of this wine so far, and it just opened not that long ago, is a deepness, a deep richness. This was an ideal vintage for Napa Valley producers, and every one of them will say that was the vintage of the decade right there. So deep, rich, very alluring, very rocky, as far as the minerality of this wine goes too. Remember, it is from a hillside up there in Hell Mountain. Super engaging. It's big. It's big. I love it. For me, as a sommelier and who owns this bottle of wine, I should have decanted it. And it's for everyone out there for that bought 2013. You need to really think about where it's at this point. It is one of those vintages that was made to age. These opportunities are not all there. If you look at the other vintages of Napa Valley, 14 was another bounty vintage. 15 yields were cut in half pretty much because of the drought. We get into 16, a very good showy vintage. 18 about the same. 19 we'll talk about in more detail in a few minutes. But definitely 17 was one of those vintages that took some hits because of this thing called a fire, and the fire really affected it. And there's something that's very different about vintages, but also about varieties, and how long does it take to ripen a variety. So Cabernet Sauvignon comes over here and really brought in basically in the 1880s originally, but really didn't make a big splash until the 1960s. And we give Robert Mondavi and a lot of people credit for that, for really charging this up, and University of California Davis really promoting this. But the fact is that Cabernet Sauvignon takes a little bit of time to ripen, especially if you want it full-bodied and you really want it to do what it has the ability to do. So, when we get into that, you have to be able to achieve that. I give Napa Valley vintners tons of credit because they were pretty consistent of high quality across the board, but this one really stood out as far as something that they hadn't achieved at this point. There's been vintages that are very, very age-worthy. We were just tasting through some 90s cabs that were amazing, but they definitely didn't taste like this one. This one's got more body, more structure, a little bit more ripeness. We have different clones in there, different types of planting material, and different farming techniques that's allowed us to do that in Napa Valley. I think this is an amazing wine. I probably will have much more fun with it tomorrow when it has time to really kind of open up a little bit more. But I think that's a very good example. So when it came out, say about 2015, maybe 2016 when it was released, who benefited from this wine? Because it's so tight, so big, so just in your face when it was released. The people that benefited the most were retailers and online sales. Because it had a high mark, we all knew that it was going to age. So it became a wine collector's wine, or a vintage for wine collectors. Not so much for sommeliers. Sommeliers go through vintages whoop, like that. Great wines sell. I mean, that's what it is. And so for retailers to sell this and get it as much as they could, put it on their on their shelves or their mailing lists, and really get it into cellars like this, that's the advantage. It sold out pretty quick. And I'm tasting one here. I gotta say that some of the other ones that I tasted, especially at our tasting for a perfect vintage, outstanding. There were two in there. The Haber one was like, wow, that one's amazing. It tasted so beautiful, that chocolatey flavor in there. It was tasting wonderful right there. But not all of them are ready yet. So you really have to study those. If you've collected some of these 2013s and you've got multiple bottles, you might want to taste one and decant it first, just to to be safe. At least if you're cooking and you're going to pull a bottle of that out, pop that bottle open right when you start cooking, pour some in the glass, and really let it open up and see where it's at. And if you have to decant it, half an hour in, do it. So that's what I want to say about this. This is a memorable vintage, but it's also one that is built to age. Very big, powerful wines that are built to age. Fantastic, but you're not going to see them in every wine list because they just it would take a lot to open this baby up. On the other hand, what we will see here with Pinot Noir is an advantage that Pinot Noir has is it doesn't take that long to ripen. So when we go to the second half of last decade, we really have some really great examples of Pinot Noir and how its close proximity to the ocean really benefited it. And I will say that those last four vintages of the last decade were outstanding in so many ways. So like Cabernet 2015, low yields, and that's just what it was. It was a winemaker's vintage, but it wasn't about that much that we could get anyways, because the drought really affected it. But as we taste this, this one's the Fels. This is from Anderson Valley. But like I said, I had just tasted this Papapietro with that amazing class that I did with a lot of the great producers from Ancien, from Cuvée Son, from Macrosti, and I also poured some wines from Domaine Carneros and Davis Bynum just last weekend. So it was great to talk about the clones, Attack of the Clones. But what has made Pinot Noir so great here on the West Coast is really its ability to adapt to areas, as we've seen here in Sonoma County, and in this case, Anderson Valley, and even all the way up to Willamette Valley and down to, Santa Rita Hills as well, which is in Santa Barbara County. It's also a process that really doesn't take that long to ripen. So if we talk about what grapes are picked at the beginning of the year, obviously the first ones that are picked are for sparkling wines. They really need high acid. They've got flavors, but they're not as developed as the Pinot Noir that'll be right after it, because Pinot Noir is usually the second layer that gets picked. It's even usually before Chardonnay. And the reason for that is that it really has great acidity. And I want to say this about the 2019 vintage, that it came right after the 2016, 2017, and 2018. So the 2016 and 2018 have a lot in common. They were both showy, but they were also big and generous with their flavor profiles. 2017, let's go back to comparison with Napa Sonoma. 2017, the advantage for Pinot Noir was it got picked first. It got picked before the fires. It wasn't out there when the fires came. It wasn't influenced by smoke. So it was a good vintage. Its problem was it got a little bit ripe because of the Labor Day weekend heat wave that came in. And if you guys remember that, it was scary heat. But what we really kind of learned from that is 4 vintages in a row really shows us a lot about the improvement and the advancement of Pinot Noir here on the West Coast, and especially here in Sonoma County. And it's because I think the original focus was on ripeness and how ripe can we get these things. And you could leave it on the vine for as long as you wanted to, and you could try to make Cabernet like Pinots, but that's not really the focus. When they made the adjustments to really focus on the vineyards and to showcase those flavors that were coming out of different blocks and putting them together, life became better for everyone. And here we are benefiting from it. And this great grape right here, and this is a collage of different clones in here. And clones are important too, because sometimes based on the heat from that year, you'll see strengths of different clones, and clones are the different plant materials. So we have the kind of the old school ones like the Pommard and Martini clone, and sometimes 2A up in Anderson Valley, which is a Swiss clone. But then we have the Dijon clones like the 115, 667, 777, which were brought in through Oregon State University. And when you get into this, what we can do here, I think with these coastal areas, it's so great. They were not as battered by the fires in 2017 as other areas were on the interior, but wind was blowing in all different directions. But these grapes were picked first. So we had a good vintage from 2017. The 16 and 18, super duper showy. But the 2019, what makes it so special and why it's so important for me to talk about it? We didn't have a 2020, and neither did Napa, to be really honest. We had a lot of problems, and that was all because of the wildfires that were started by lightning. So when you guys pick up a bottle of 2019, if it's the Napa Valley Cab or if it's the Pinot Noir, really appreciate it because it had a certain quality that these other wines did not have, especially these Pinots. So if you look at all the kinds of trademarks of, oh, Russian River, I love the berry flavors, or down in Carneros and the Pinot Noirs from down there, oh, I love that cherry. That cherry's so great. Or if you go out to, Occidental and that kind of area out there, you always get that little blueberry flavor. You'll get some of that, but you'll get more intensity. But you'll also get higher acid and you'll get definitely lower alcohol. To achieve that, never been done. To have all these things all at the same time in the same vintage spread out across all these cooler climate areas. It's a special vintage. And, I was just thinking about my great friend Ross Cobb, who was his Coastlands vineyard is way out on the coast. He wasn't affected by the wildfires for quite a while, but eventually it came to him. And you know what? He felt that 2020 vintage was the best one he'd ever done, but it was right on the heels of the 2019, which was the best one he'd done in 30 years of being part of the wine industry. So think about these things and think about, when you taste one of these 2019 Pinot Noirs, it really does have something special beyond, its flavor profile and everything. It really is a situation where it is where we're going. It set a new bar from this point onwards and into this decade about what we can do with Pinot Noir from this point on. With these Cabernets, obviously, there were hard situations over in Napa Valley, but you know what? They made awesome wines. So you get these great vintages, and you have this one that's a great collector's item. What I love about these four vintages in a row that closed out the last decade with Pinot Noir from all these areas here in Sonoma County, Anderson Valley, and different areas here in Northern California that specialize in Pinot Noir is just that these consistency is exactly what sommeliers want. It's kind of what you need too, because you'll drink through what you've got with Pinot Noir and it's gone. How about that next vintage? There weren't any dogs in there from the 15 onwards to the 19. Obviously, we don't have a 2020 of note, and that's going to be, it's a hardship, but you've got that 2019 to really enjoy until that 2021, which was an outstanding vintage, comes along. So I wanted to give you guys that insight. I wanted to make you excited about tasting a 2019, not only of the Pinots, but also of the Cabs as well. But just remember that sometimes you'll have those vintages, which are really, they're vintages and they're so strong, they're so heavy that they're really not drinkable now. And that's a problematic thing when you really think about it. You put it on the table and you go, oh my God, my food that I cooked so hard just got completely overwhelmed by this wine. And in some cases, when Pinot Noir comes into play, you don't want one that was made to age either, if you're really just going to enjoy it now. Obviously, I got a cellar. I'm going to sit on this stuff for a while, but that's not really what I do at the restaurant and what a lot of sommeliers think about either. I want it to taste really great the minute I open it there. And so these vintages for Pinot Noir are really important to me, and I hope they're important to you too. I think you'll enjoy them, and please visit some of those wineries that are pouring those 2017 to 2018, 2019 vintages right now, because they are showy. But this one, when you taste it, the 2019, taste it a little bit deeper and really try to find that difference there of that high acid, lower alcohol, which sommeliers love. So I hope you guys enjoyed this and got a little bit of information out of it. Great vintages. We always have the opportunity to do them. Mother Nature, help us out sometimes. And as you could see, we did our best last year, or not last year, but through the last decade. And we did extremely good overall. But we don't know what's going to happen, especially with heat conditions, rain, hail in the middle of summer. These things happen now. we're not that far off from what Burgundy and Bordeaux face. So we have to be able to adjust, and I give the winemakers a lot of credit for all of that. So I can't have them all here, but salute to them and salute to you guys for listening to this amazing episode of The Varietal Show. We'll be back again next week, and thanks once again for tuning in. Cheers!